overseeing the England team for 4 major tournaments. And with that in mind, Gareth Southgate has decided to stand down as England manager. Let's bring in Rob Harris. He joins us on the phone. Rob, there's been much debate in the last 36, 48 hours as to whether Gareth Southgate would remain in place, indeed whether he was the right man for the job. But it seems he has made that decision for the Football Association and decided to stand down. Well, we'll bring Rob Harris in when we do have him, but it sounds like we don't have him yet. Of course, leaning more on that point I just made, there was much debate in recent days as to whether Gareth Southgate was the right person to continue in post or whether the FA would want him. Much reporting was suggesting he would be asked by the FA to stay, but he's made that decision in advance. And we've got some comments coming across now from Southgate. He says, as a proud Englishman, it has been the honour of my life to play for England and to manage England. It has meant everything to me and I've given it my all, but it's time for change and for a new chapter. Sunday's final in Berlin against Spain was my final game as England manager. Gareth Southgate talking there about, of course, his patriotism and the fact that he decided to go on his own right. I've got a bit more of this statement coming across from Gareth Southgate. I joined the FA in 2011, determined to improve English football. In that time, including 8 years as England's men's manager, I've been supported by some brilliant people who have my heartfelt thanks. I could not have had anyone better alongside me than Steve Holland. He's one of the most talented coaches of his generation and has been immense. I have had the privilege of leading a large group of players in 102 games. Every one of them has been proud to wear the 3 lions on their shirt, and they've been a credit to their country in so many ways. The squad we took to Germany is full of exciting young talent, and they can win the trophy we all dream of. I'm so proud of them. I hope we get behind the players and the team at St George's Park and the FA, who strive every day to improve English football and understand the power football has to drive positive change. My special thanks go to the backroom staff who have provided the players and me with unstinting support over the last 8 years. Their hard work and commitment inspired me every day, and I'm so grateful to them. The brilliant team behind the team, he says. We have the best fans in the world and their support has meant the world to me. I'm an England fan and I always will be. I look forward to watching and celebrating as the players go on to create more special memories and to connect and inspire the nation as we know they can. Thank you, England, for everything. Well, Rob Harris is able to join us now. And I just bring you, Rob, once again, the opening line of Gareth Southgate's statement saying it's been the honour of his life to play for England and to manage England. It's meant everything to him and he's given it his all. But it's time for change and a new chapter. Rob, it seems from this statement, from everything crossing, this is a decision that Gareth Southgate has made personally.
Yes, very unusual perhaps in football where it's the manager's decision himself whether or not to stay on rather than his own bosses. But everything had been pointing to Gareth Southgate's reign ending after this tournament. I interviewed him in Germany on Friday and he told me about the emotional rollercoaster that he'd been through as he was weighing up his own future. Then on Sunday, post-match in Berlin, live on air, I revealed that I'd heard he wanted a break. And now this is the break he's decided to take from football. He's steps aside from England after 8 very transformative years. He's been very concerned about the level of abuse and criticism he faced during the Euros in Germany. And he believed that actually people perhaps were forgetting just where he'd taken them. And he told me again on Friday that he believes he's helped to restore the credibility of English football, because as we step back at this moment and Gareth Southgate leaves the job after 102 games in 8 years, he took the men's team to highs not experienced since 1966 and Sir Alf Ramsey. 3 semi-finals in 4 tournaments, back-to-back finals, fine margins costing England in both of those finals. On Sunday in Berlin, it was a superior Spain side who got the better of them with a 2-1 victory 3 years ago at Wembley. It was Italy who beat them on penalties in the final. And there will be those who question perhaps his caution and when he decided to make changes in matches and perhaps sticking with certain players like Harry Kane on Sunday for too long. But ultimately, he has given the fans highs that they had not been used to experiencing following the England team. And when some might consider why do we sort of dwell on this so much, even when you sort of talk to someone like Gareth Southgate and those in football, there are a few jobs with the profile of that of England manager and the status and how it brings the nation together. Watching the England teams, the fact is these are matches like the final watched by more than 20 million people in the country. Few things can bring the country together like a tournament football match. But certainly he's now said that he believes it is time for a change, and that reflects the fact he'd been sort of sensing that strained bond, I think, with the fans throughout the tournament in Germany.
Rob, talk to me about the way in which he united the players, which I think is fair to say for much of otherwise this century there was a lot of division in the ranks when England players got together. But in doing so also united the fans. And it's interesting that we're talking about some of the disappointments and clearly no trophy has been won. But each of these 4 tournaments he's taken England to haven't been followed up with the same sense of despondency and, I guess, aggressive calls for change at the top, highlighted by the fact that he is the one deciding to go.
Yes, we got used to England at tournaments stumbling out, leading to sort of calls for overhauls of the game. We need to remember where England were as a men's team when Gareth Southgate took over. At Euro 2016, had just been embarrassed by Iceland, knocked out in the last 16. Then we had the whole saga of Sam Allardyce taking charge for one game before being caught out in an undercover newspaper sting. And Gareth Southgate himself had ruled himself out initially of replacing Roy Hodgson after Euro 2016, believing he lacked the experience to step up from being under-21's manager. He stepped in an initial basis, and really at a time of turmoil amongst one of the first things he actually said as England manager was he likes football, but perhaps not the industry that much. But he certainly made an impact and did bring the team together. We had the cliques of the past, it seemed, with certain club groupings. There was even a sense of players not wanting to turn up for international duty. Then on international duty, players even reluctant to face the media. He did actually create a better environment, including media-player relations, bringing in some techniques more familiar with American sports about trying to sort of bring the media and players closer together. And of course, ultimately, it's about results. And it was that unexpected run at the 2018 World Cup to the semi-finals. Gareth Southgate in his waistcoat that endeared him to the nation, the team to the nation. They even won a penalty shootout on the way in the last 16. And that perhaps showed that there can be this affection with the national team again. And it was particularly notable because it was that unifying impact of the England team around 2018 at a time of political division, all those Brexit votes through Parliament, which was something Gareth Southgate would often reflect about him being and the team being this sort of unifying force while the country was so divided after the 2016 referendum. And then also he had to deal with various societal and social issues, including players being racially abused. And he was someone who was able to sort of be a sort of comforting figure around that period and as well around the pandemic. So there has often been a sense that people might not appreciate what the contribution Gareth Southgate made to the England team until he's left it, because he had to take on a leadership role far beyond just being a coach in the dugout.
Let's just recap the full statement from Gareth Southgate, who has just announced, as we've been discussing, that he is stepping down as England manager following the loss on Sunday against Spain in the final of the European Championships. Here's the statement from Gareth Southgate. As a proud Englishman, it's been the honour of my life to play for England and to manage England. It's meant everything to me. I've given it my all, but it's time for change, for a new chapter. Sunday's final in Berlin against Spain was my final game as England manager. He goes on to thank the FA. He thanks many members of his team. He says, I could not have had anyone better alongside me than Steve Holland. But he also talks extensively about what he refers to as the team behind the team and all those that work across the FA and at St George's Park. And he says they all strive every day to improve English football, and they understand the power football has to drive positive change. He also has a paragraph of thanks to what he says are, quote, the best fans in the world. Their support has meant everything, has meant the world to me. I'm an England fan and I always will be. And he ends the statement by saying, I look forward to watching and celebrating as the players go on to create more special memories and to connect and inspire the nation as we know they can. Thank you, England, for everything. Rob, just to pick up on that final paragraph about looking forward to watching the players go on to create more special memories. I guess one of his legacies has been to create hope and expectation that there will be more great memories in the years to come, perhaps even as soon as the 2026 World Cup, which will be held in North America, because the prospects are good when you look at the fact that we've reached a final, albeit unsuccessfully, with quite a young team. One of his legacies will be bringing in the young players.
Yes, some might have called him a cautious manager, but for this tournament in Germany, obviously that finished with the 2-1 defeat to Spain on Sunday in the final. Half the squad had changed since 2022 when England made it to the quarterfinals of the World Cup and lost to France. So he was already looking to the future and thinking about potentially his successor. He brought the likes of Kobbie Mainoo in, put him into midfield. The fact he was starting at his first tournament, Mark Gay, the Crystal Palace defender as well. Key roles for the likes of Phil Foden, other players at the other end of their careers, given a chance finally to break through, like Ollie Watkins in his late 20s as a striker in place of Harry Kane. We do now have actually a statement from the FA Chief Executive, Mark Bullingham, as well, who says that the process for appointing Gareth's successor is now underway, and we aim to have our new manager confirmed as soon as possible. Our Nations League campaign starts in September, and we have an interim solution in place if it is needed. We know there will be inevitable speculation, but we won't be commenting further on our process until we appoint. That's the statement from the FA Chief Executive, Mark Bullingham, which also does reflect on how Gareth, he says, made the impossible job possible and laid strong foundations for the future. He is held in the highest regard by the players, the backroom team, by everyone at the FA and across the world of football. The statement also does talk about all the successes Gareth Southgate's achieved, which is something we can discuss more from Mark Bullingham, but it's his point about the interim solutions and the successes of which will obviously come into focus. Some of those names in the frame already. Graham Potter, who most recently managed Chelsea but hasn't been in a job since April of 2023. Eddie Howe, the Newcastle manager as well, touted as a potential successor.
Well, let's touch on that, Rob, because obviously the focus will quite quickly turn to who's going to take over. I mean, the first question on that, and there's been a lot of back and forth over this in the last couple of decades about whether the England manager should be English or not. You mentioned a couple of the candidates there. If it is English, the likes of Eddie Howe at Newcastle, as you said, Graham Potter, the former Brighton and Chelsea manager, possible candidates to be considered. But are we in the mindset that we expect the FA to stick with an English manager, or might they consider foreign? And again, one of the names that jumps straight away to mind is the former Liverpool manager, who's obviously available, Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, and actually did ask Gareth Southgate in another of my interviews just before the tournament whether he believed he might need a break, as Jurgen Klopp seemingly has decided to, after leaving Liverpool, having been there for 9 years. He is someone who's got a strong connection with English football, having been at Liverpool and achieved success. The question is whether he does want a break. He was most recently linked to the United States job actually over the last week, and suggestions he didn't want to take that. Another name that's been touted as well is Mauricio Pochettino, the former Tottenham and Chelsea manager. He left Chelsea at the end of last season. Through his time, particularly at Tottenham, he brought through quite a few of those young players and players who formed the key part of the squad into the 2018 World Cup. Again, in the last season at Chelsea, he's helped to develop Cole Palmer, who was a shining light in a struggling Chelsea side last season, who, of course, scored the equaliser in Berlin on Sunday against Spain, a 22-year-old talent. So, he's certainly got that connection as an Argentine to English football, having been part of it for now, well over a decade, having been at Southampton as well. So I don't think necessarily, of course, that the FA will rule out a foreign manager, because the Lionesses, of course, are managed by Serena Wiegman, and she's shown how to win a trophy, winning the Euros trophy in 2022, taking the Lionesses to the final of the Women's World Cup last year, of course, losing to Spain again, who seems to be the barrier for these England sides at the moment. So she as a Dutch coach, has certainly managed to make an impact with the England women's team. So I don't think nationality will be a barrier in any way. But there aren't the English managers at the top level. There's a very stark statistic. No English coach has ever won the Premier League since its inception in 1992. So perhaps that reflects where the Premier League is at, and English coaching is at as well. Obviously, Gareth Southgate did come through the ranks from being under 21's manager, and also having that sort of role, helping to even develop things like St George's Park as the technical HQ for England teams.
What's the thought as well, Rob, whilst we're on it, about who will be England captain going forward? Obviously, the default expectation would be that it's still Harry Kane, but a new manager will have to make that appointment fresh again and reaffirm it. Is it possible that Harry Kane might decide to do something similar to Southgate is doing at the moment and get ahead of that and say he still wants to be captain but understands that decision might change going forward? What's the latest expectation there?
That will be a decision for the new manager to decide who's part of their leadership group, and particularly the captain. Now, Harry Kane faced a lot of scrutiny in this tournament. Yes, he did finish as joint top scorer, but did not make an impact in many of the matches, wasn't a constant threat, seemed sluggish at times, which is perhaps understandable in a way because he just come off a season with Bayern Munich where he scored almost 40 goals. So there's no doubting he still has that scoring threat at the age of 30, certainly far from his career ending. But it seems very often in these tournaments that the tolls of the season do catch up with him.
Forgive me for jumping in. We are going to return to that story of Gareth Southgate deciding to step down as England manager in just a moment. But it's a morning of high-profile resignations. We, of course, reported the news that 4 members of Vaughan Gethin's cabinet had resigned en masse in unison earlier today. And we now just have a statement from the First Minister of Wales, Vaughan Gething, saying, "I have this morning taken the difficult decision to begin the process of stepping down as leader of the Welsh Labour Party and, as a result, as First Minister." Let's bring in Sky's Dan Whitehead, who is in Cardiff for us this morning. Dan, the critical factor, clearly, that pushed him over the line, there's been pressure on him for some weeks, of course, was seemingly 4 members of his cabinet forcing his hand by resigning themselves earlier today.
Yeah, that news of 4 of his cabinet ministers resigning this morning really made the position for Vaughan Gething untenable. And the breaking news in the last few minutes is that the First Minister has resigned. You brought some of his letter there. Let me just bring you a little bit more. Vaughan Gething saying, "Having been elected as leader of my party in March, I had hoped that over the summer a period of reflection, rebuilding and renewal could take place under my leadership. I recognise now that that is not possible. It's been the honour of my life to do this job, even for a few short months, to see the dedication of public service from our civil service and the dedication of civility from the Welsh public." The letter goes on paying tribute to the Welsh public and the communities who he has served. And he says, "I wanted to give power to those without a voice. That has always been my motivation. This has been the most difficult time for me and my family." So Vaughan Gething, in the last couple of seconds, standing down, he says he will discuss a timetable for the election of a new leader of my party. And he says, "I want to finally thank you say thank you to those who have reached out to support me and my teams." Let me just let's just take a step back and explain how we got to this point. Firstly, over the last 6 months, Vaughan Gething has faced a lot of pressure, mainly because of a donation which he received for £200,000 for his leadership campaign. It came from an environmental company in Wales, which the owner had criminal convictions for environmental breaches. There was a lot of controversy surrounding that donation. That led to a vote of no confidence here in the Senate last month, in which he lost. The pressure on Vaughan Gething has significantly ramped up in the last sort of 7 to 10 days, and that is all surrounding the sacking by Vaughan Gething of a former Welsh minister, Hannah Blythen. He sacked her because he accused Hannah Blythen of being a leak to the press over iMessages relating to the COVID pandemic, messages that had shown Vaughan Gething allegedly saying he would delete some of his messages because they could be obtained under freedom of information. Those messages got to the press. Vaughan Gething said it was Hannah Blythen. She has vehemently denied that she was the leak and the source ever since this happened. And tomorrow in the Senate, the Welsh Tories had brought forward a motion, a vote in the Senate, to compel Vaughan Gething to release the evidence. Why did you sack Hannah Blythen? If you're so confident and you say you've got the evidence, let us see it, because it's never been published. A couple of days ago, a news website in Wales, Nation Cymru, which published that story, came out and said that Hannah Blythen wasn't the source. So this pressure has been ramping up over the last sort of 72 hours or so, and it's come to a head this morning with the news that 4 cabinet ministers for the Welsh government have resigned. So Jeremy Miles, who was the economy minister, Leslie Griffiths, who was the culture minister, Julie James, climate, and Mick Antoniou, who is the Counsel General for the Welsh Government, have all stood down. So 4 really big cabinet positions in the Welsh Government, they all quit. And I'd say it's taken, about 2 hours now for that pressure to really sink through. And clearly Vaughan Gething has realised that he simply had no way of keeping hold of his job. So he now has announced in this letter, which we've just obtained, that he is going to stand down as First Minister of Wales and that there will be a timetable for a new leader to be put in place. This is extremely significant news because, of course, nationally this comes off the back of the general election where we saw Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister, campaigning a few times alongside the Labour leader here, Vaughan Gething, saying that they will be united in working together to strengthen Labour, the first time that they've been in power on either end of the Severn Bridge for the first time in 14 years. And we saw the Tories completely wiped out here in Wales. Well, here we have the Labour leader having to resign. Let me bring you a response from the Tory leader here in Wales, Andrew Davis. He said that Vaughan Gething's time as First Minister is rightly coming to an end. This statement came before he actually resigned. Labour cannot fool the people of Wales. These ministers, like Jeremy Miles, who's just quit this morning, they sat in his cabinet, they stood by his side, and they're culpable for the breakdown of governance in Wales. Wales will remember. The writing really was on the wall for Vaughan Gething after he lost the vote of confidence in the Senate last month, because he, as I say, didn't have the vote of the Parliament behind me here. It would have been incredibly difficult for him to pass his budget, to get things through. And he only lost that vote of confidence on a narrow margin. It's because 2 of his own Labour ministers didn't turn up, and one of them was Hannah Blythen, who he'd sacked. So it wasn't particularly surprising. So it's all come to a head, and what is going to be really interesting is that at 1:30 it's FMQs here. We're going to see the First Minister stand up in the Senate behind me just a few hours after he has resigned. That is going to be something to watch. But the breaking news here in Wales this afternoon is that Vaughan Gething has announced his resignation and is standing down as First Minister. And as I say, he has said in that letter that he will discuss a timetable for the election of a new leader of his party.
Dan, great stuff. Thanks so much for bringing us all of the details there on the news that the First Minister of Wales, Vaughan Gething, is announcing that he is going to begin the process of stepping down. We're going to pivot back to the other breaking news, the other resignation of the morning, and that is that Gareth Southgate has announced he is resigning as England manager, stepping down, of course, just a couple of days after taking England to the final of the Euro 2024 championships, losing, though, alas, to Spain in the final 2-1, ending an 8-year tenure as manager and taking it into 4 tournaments, the World Cup semi-finals in 2018, the Euro 2020 final in 2021, delayed by a year, quarterfinals of the World Cup in 2022, and then the final once again of the Euros just recently. Let's bring in Jay Bothroyd, former England striker, also with us Rob Harris, our sports reporter. Jay, to you first of all, what is Gareth Southgate's legacy?
I mean, he's had a great run. I think that from where he took over from his previous manager, I think he's done a great job. But ultimately, football is about results. And even though he's done fantastically well, getting us to a quarter-final, semi-finals and 2 finals, ultimately we need to win. And I think that with the players that you see in that squad, we should be playing more attacking football and we should be dominating games more. And I think that's where Gareth Southgate has come unstuck. But I think his overall tenure as a manager has been fantastic.
The very fact, Jay, that you're saying England should be winning a tournament shows the way in which he's changed expectations and changed the mentality of all of us as England football fans. That wasn't the expectation leading into many of the tournaments before he took over.
Yeah, you're right. I think the last time that there has been huge pressure on the national team was the golden years of, you know, Beckham, Gerrard, Scholes, you know, them kind of players, Rooney. And then there was expectations because those players were so good. And obviously, you didn't get over the line there either. You know, we haven't won any major competition since '66. And I look at the squad now and I feel like this particular squad of players is probably the best overall squad in the world. We're not playing attacking football. There's always lots of questions about his formations and the personnel. When he took over, he said that he's going to play the best players who are in form. That hasn't happened all the time. Again, there was questions with Maguire, Calvin Phillips. He made a ridiculous statement about Calvin Phillips recently, you know, saying that we haven't had a natural replacement for Calvin Phillips for the last 7 years. I think the fact that he's saying statements like that obviously doesn't go down well with the media and the public. I feel like now is that even though he's done a great job, I think it's now time for someone else to take over that can manage the egos in this squad. Because when he did take over, you know, some of these players were like really young. Bellingham wasn't even in the squad. He wasn't even thought of. But now some of these players have grown into top world-class players. They need a manager that can handle these big egos. And I think, unfortunately, Gareth Southgate has taken this England team as far as they can go.
Rob, reflect for us on the manner that Gareth Southgate has had about him during his tenure as England manager. I guess also reflected in his statement today and his decision to resign himself rather than to force the FA to make a decision. He's conducted himself with the highest level of, I guess, respect for the job that he had.
Yes, I mean, Gareth Southgate brought incredible decency to the job. The fact that he had this sort of calm, cool demeanour, there was no sense of ego or bravado, and he really just tried to do a duty for the country. It's why the fact he initially turned it down the job. I mean, I can give us a slight anecdote that on the day of the Euro 2016 final involving France and Portugal, I actually was with Gareth Southgate in Paris, and the meeting after me was actually with the chief executive of the FA at the time, and we were then to learn that he had decided that he didn't believe he was suitable as a replacement at the time for Roy Hodgson when presented with the potential opportunity to take one of the biggest jobs in football. Obviously, it opened up then after the scandal involving Sam Allardyce, but it's the way he's managed to lead England and raise the expectations, which will truly be his legacy, and the fact that he hasn't outstayed, as he would believe, his welcome when he would have had the opportunity to stay on for a third World Cup. He's the one who's recognised it's time for a change, and there's had to have been a great toll that he's now felt during this.
Jay, who should be the next manager?
Well, one, there's two candidates for me. One, I don't think will ever happen because, I mean, I would say Klopp, but he's German, so I don't think that will ever happen. But I would like to see Pochettino in there, and I think that's more realistic. Obviously, he's vacant at the moment. He's got a good rapport with the British players, as in he was at Tottenham and he was at Chelsea, obviously. I think Chelsea cut his time short, but actually Chelsea done well. But I think he was a good candidate purely for the fact that...
I think we're losing Jay there, so why don't we bring in now the former executive director of the Football Association, David Davis. David, great to have you join us. A perfect person to have on to reflect on this news. What is, in your mind, the legacy of Gareth Southgate as England manager?
Oh, the legacy is that basically he has been one of, if not the outstanding manager of certainly my lifetime in that role, a very, very difficult role. People talk about, they talk about successful people in other fields of life, not least in business. The difference here is the level of scrutiny, and particularly during the big events like the Euros, which we've just seen. And he has dealt with all those things particularly well. And I would argue, because I was lucky enough to know him very much as a player, who, yes, missed the famous penalty in Euro 96, yes, went to the World Cup of 1998, and played at a very high level, at a very good level in those tournaments. But you know something that people forget? He went to the 2002 World Cup in Japan and never kicked a ball in anger. It was never chosen for the starting lineup. And he will tell you, he learned an enormous amount from that experience about how to deal with tournament football, and not least with players who were not going to start every game.
It's fascinating with that perspective that you have, David, given that you were running the FA for the 90s, the 2000s, or much of those decades. Reflect for me on the way in which expectations, which obviously comes with pressure, as you're alluding to, have been changed by Southgate. I mean, were we ever as confident as a nation going into tournaments, ever as expectant as we were coming into this Euros during your tenure?
Well, the answer to that is no, but expectations have always been enormously high. Whether they've been realistic is another matter. What Gareth has done, and I can remember the objective of certain of my contemporaries and myself, was that we were going to get to a stage where England consistently in major tournaments performed at a high level and got to semi-finals and finals. Has that happened in Gareth's time? For sure it has.
In terms of what next, and we'll come back to talk about Gareth again in a moment, obviously you made the decision to hire Sven-Göran Eriksson. At the time, it was fairly controversial to pick a foreign manager for the England national team. Since then, there's been Fabio Capello, of course, as well. But we've had a run now of English managers, whether it was of course Allardyce briefly, Hodgson before that, McLaren had a run as well. Do you think the FA will stick with an English manager, or will they consider a foreign manager? And what do you think they should do?
I think they'll want to stick with an English manager, an English-born manager if they can, and if they think the right person is there with the right experience so far. I think it's a very difficult choice this time. I mean, there's not one candidate screaming at you that he or she is the right person for the job. I am still of the belief, yes, I was involved in Sven's appointment and will defend that to the last. His appointment, I thought, was overwhelmingly successful. You say it was controversial, you know, Wolf. We talked to people about would it be acceptable in, in those years, the early 2000s, will it be acceptable to have a non-English-born manager of the English national team? And in the end, people were at a place that they felt we must have the best person for the job. I think that will still be the view today.
Would you consider the likes of Klopp, Pochettino, who are both, I guess, available ahead of some of the English names that are being mooted, from Graham Potter to Eddie Howe?
Well, would I want to consider them? For sure, I would. I think I'm not totally convinced when you say Jurgen Klopp is available. I understand his view is very strongly that he wants to have a break, and understandably so. But we shall see. There are very good English-born candidates as well. I mean, the great thing, you know, that Gareth has done is the international team is now respected and actually does. We've seen the excitement in the recent tournament. Does excite people. We may not always play brilliantly, but it brings the nation together in a way, dare I say, that few others can do.
Talk to us about that. We may not always play the best football necessarily. I mean, has there been, and maybe it's always been the case, but has there been an evolution, a sort of acceptance now that tournament football isn't necessarily about playing the best football. It's about getting the job done, which Gareth Southgate so nearly did twice over. And is that what matters much more than the style of football that you play?
Well, I mean, in an ideal world, you play brilliant, flowing football every time you get on the pitch, and you win every game by a multitude of goals. It's not like that. I always remind people who won the last World Cup. They were called Argentina. They had a player called Messi. How did Argentina go on in the qualifying games for that World Cup? Not very well, you will discover, and you will be reminded. And I think they lost to Saudi Arabia. And I think that is the reality. In international football these days, there aren't many, if any, easy matches. The days of big scorelines are pretty well behind us. And going through a tournament, Gareth actually had a predictable experience, in my view, in this tournament just gone. You know, they started okay, it dropped. Everybody said, oh, it's dull and England aren't playing very well. He's not making the best of his abilities. And then suddenly, yes, we had luck. No question about that. To win a major tournament, you have to have some good fortune. The Spanish had it, by the way, if you look at some of the knockout games. I think the Spanish were the best team in the Euros, and they deserve to win. Gareth wouldn't deny that about the final, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we've reached a point now where people understand international football a bit better. It's pretty difficult, you know, to play at the top of your game throughout a major tournament. They're going to have, 48 teams, I think, in the World Cup across the continent of North America in 2 years' time. That will be a heck of an achievement. To win that would be phenomenal. But I think my own personal view is Gareth has made the right decision. He's had a very good innings. I don't think anyone would dispute that. In a very high-pressured job. It's time for somebody else to take that burden. They'll do it because, particularly the English candidates, very, very few people who love football, who are in football, who are imbued with football, turn the job down. You wait. If an English person is offered that job, I'll be surprised to see them turn it down.
David, I'm interested in your assessment of what will have gone through Gareth Southgate's mind in the last couple of days. Clearly, you will have consoled and spoken to England managers after not winning tournaments in the past, and some of whom who will have ultimately lost their job for better or worse after those tournaments. How big a debate will he have had in his own mind about whether he should stay or go?
Well, I've been lucky enough to have been by text in touch with Gareth a little bit over the past few weeks. But if I go back to the wider experience, I know how desperate it is to have the disappointment of losing at the stages that teams in my experience did, whether it was quarterfinals, semi-finals, the dreaded penalties and all that. I think in this case, Frank, personally, thought he might well have left the job after the World Cup in Qatar. I understand why he stayed on. I think the temptation to fight on, because it's so close, it's so achingly close to winning England are achingly close to winning a major tournament. If you talk to people in other countries, they will say over the past 25 years, England have not been the luckiest football team in the world. And I think we made up for that in this tournament, because we definitely had moments of good fortune and equalising goals in the 95th minute and the rest of it. But I think genuinely we are at a point where he will have felt, I think win or lose in this tournament, he was going to move on after this. I think he wants to prove I'm sure he wants to have a break. You won't blame him for that. But I'm sure he will want to prove himself in club football, possibly abroad, and be out of the intense firing line. Yes, managers of Liverpool and Man U and Real Madrid and all the rest of it have enormous pressures on them. But the pressure on a top manager who makes progress in these big tournaments is pretty well right up there at the top.
David, I'm not sure if you're able to stick around for a few more moments. We'll totally understand after that extended interview if you do have to leave us. We're able to bring in now as well to join the conversation Miguel Delaney from The Independent and Henry Winter, independent journalist himself, for their perspectives, the former lead writer at The Times, of course. Henry, I'll come to you first. What is your reaction to this decision from Gareth Southgate, and what do you think his legacy is?
Inevitable, the decision. You saw this fantastic collection of players that England have, and these are elite players who work for elite managers at their clubs, and Southgate just didn't really have those key abilities at the key crunch moments to get them over the line. But in terms of his legacy, well, it's huge. I mean, anyone who was in Nice for the tail end of Roy Hodgson's career and just saw the disconnect between players and supporters, between players and the media, between players and management almost by the end. Southgate changed all that. He's changed the culture. He's taken the fear out of the shirt. He's rebuilt the relations with the fans and the media. He's definitely restored pride. As David was saying, there's far more respect for England in the world. But we have to set that against the fact that this is probably one of the most talented generations of footballers that England have. And absolutely, he should be achieving with them. So, look, it's inevitable that he's gone, but he goes with the nation's thanks.
Miguel, what's your take on his decision to step down? And I guess spin it forward for us. Who do you think the FA will turn to next?
Yeah, I think it's right, as Henry said there. It's right, he steps down at this moment. There was an argument that it even was maybe 2 years just too far, despite getting to the final. Obviously, this has been a complicated campaign, even if in terms of pure results, one of the most successful in England's history. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it has as many, say, redeeming features as 2018 or even 2022 when they went out to the quarterfinals. There was more to it. But that said, yeah, as Henry said there, I mean, it's the right decision, but I mean, Southgate did say to us on Friday, he wants to win so bad it hurts. Now he has to live with that pain, but I suppose his legacy is actually that he brought joy back to watching England again, and especially the experience of what tournaments were. But as regards what next, I suppose this is what's very key with Southgate and how he might be seen, and that basically the platform for a manager who may be a more progressive manager who can take the next step. And from what I reported it last night, from what we're told, that at the moment there's currently 5 leading names. I mean, obviously people would talk about Jurgen Klopp, although he said he basically laughed at the US national team's offer. But the way I can see it at the moment, it doesn't necessarily have to be English nationality. It's more someone attuned to English cultures. At present is a list of Eddie Howe at Newcastle is probably the one in a non-FA job. Graham Potter, who's been free for over a year now. Mauricio Pochettino, also out of a job. Thomas Tuchel, also out of a job. And Lee Carsley, who was the under-21 manager. And if they promoted Carsley, it would be similar, of course, to what Spain have done with Luis de la Fuente.
I want to bring now a statement that's just come from, of course, the president of the FA, but also known better as Prince William, the Prince of Wales. He has just released a statement saying, "Gareth, I want to thank you, not as the president of the FA, but as an England fan. Thank you for creating a team that stands shoulder to shoulder with the world's finest in 2024. Thank you for showing humility, compassion and true leadership under the most intense pressure and scrutiny. And thank you for being an all-round class act. You should be incredibly proud of what you've achieved." Signed off with a W. Let's bring back in David Davis, the former executive director of the Football Association, for some reflection on that. I guess the tone, David, of what the Prince of Wales has said there about Gareth Southgate, but also your reflections of working with the Prince of Wales, who is a massive football fan and showing it in the last couple of weeks and in that statement.
Well, that's the sort of statement that I would expect from someone who's been an outstanding success as president of the FA and who cares about it passionately. And I mean, we've had a level of service from him and encouragement and support for the team that, we prayed for when the chance came for him to come into the job. And my goodness, he's fulfilled that. And that will mean a lot to Gareth, I'm sure. The word humility was used, I think, in that statement that I heard. And that is, I think everyone has seen Gareth's humility and decency. I mean, it's very hard not to recognize that from the moment you meet him. And he is not, occasionally in this tournament, he's shown how demonstrative he can be, and how, yes, as we've just heard, he said, "I want to win so much it hurts" on Friday, Saturday. It will have hurt enormously not to today being on a victory parade through London. But the truth of the matter is, he also will recognise that there's still work to be done. But he has handed the job on in a great place for whoever takes it over.
Henry, talk to us about what joy there would have been, not just for Southgate personally, but I think for many fans, given that humility that Southgate always showed, had he been the man to deliver glory for England, not least because of what he went through as a player.
So there's a hardcore group of England fans who travel home and away, probably about 3,000-4,000 of them. And one of the sort of main ringleaders, if that's the right word, has just messaged me with just two very simple messages. One, just saying gutted, and the second one, expanding on that, said, "Gareth made us dream." And whatever my own personal reservations, long-standing reservations, going back to Italy in the last European final about his inability to sort of react quickly enough. The fact is that the England fans, the majority of them wanted Southgate to stay on, partly because, they got longer at tournaments, even though it cost them, they enjoy staying longer at tournaments, but also because he did make them dream. And they liked the way he represented them. At his final press conference, as Miguel was sort of alluding to, he spoke so well then. He said, "I don't believe in fairy tales, but I do believe in dreams." And he had the fans dreaming.
David, I know we've got to let you go now, so I just wanted to get a final thought. Push you, if I can, on if you were still running the FA, who would you pick to replace Gareth?
I would try. I mean, I'm not ducking the question. I think I would want to choose an English-born manager. I would want to. I would go into what are the attributes, what is the experience of person X, Y, and Z, and ultimately choose the best person for the job. It may well be that person is English. They won't necessarily be the most experienced coach. Gareth wouldn't pretend to have been when he took over. And you can go for somebody in the Spanish, for example, have had some, not without being rude about some of the managers they've had, they haven't been the youngest managers you've ever seen in the world. And they've won World Cups and European Championships. So there's a tendency to think, well, the older heads are the safer choices. I'm not totally sure that's true. And it's an immensely difficult job, but my instinct is they will go for an English-born manager.
Well, David, it's been great to catch up. Thank you so much for jumping on the Newsline with us and discussing this news this morning. Let's finish the hour talking with Henry Winter. Henry, in terms of what's next, I mean, we talked briefly earlier with David about a couple of the foreign coaches that are available, Mauricio Pochettino, Jurgen Klopp. Whether they're fully available or not it remains to be seen. Should the FA be battling to convince them to join, or should they stick with an English manager?
I mean, Jurgen Klopp would be great, but I'd be amazed if they got him. It's interesting what David Davis was saying about English-born, the emphasis on English-born. So Lee Carsley, the under-21 manager, former Republic of Ireland international, but Birmingham-born, comes into play on that one. The FA, it'd make life easier if they could promote from within. Personally, I think it's got to be someone who is going to be bolder than Gareth. He's going to attack more, he gets the balance right, not bow to reputation, and be more proactive with decisions. Where I do agree with David, I do think it should be an Englishman. I think it should be our best against your best. And if our best is not good enough, then we pour more money into St George's Park and then accelerate the coaching pathway. For me, it should be Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall, but with a former England player like Ashley Cole, who is getting such rave reviews with his coaching on the pathway anyway, as Gareth's successor.
Do you think that a new manager would change who the England captain is?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think it'll be Jude Bellingham long term. I mean, I'm still abroad at the moment, and some of the sniping at Bellingham is just, why do we go down this road with players of that winning edge? We did it with Rooney. I just think it's wrong. I think Jude Bellingham will be England captain. He's England's most important player. You look what he's doing at Real Madrid. You look how respected he is around the world. I think it's great that he's demanding of Southgate, of the other players. That's exactly what we need, that winning mentality. The whole sort of Victorian amateur edge should have been banished from the Football Association by now. So I like him. Harry Kane probably feels he's probably got another 2 years left in him, probably wants to go on to America. It's quite a big decision to discard Harry Kane. Harry Kane just needs a rest and to regain his fitness. Harry Kane isn't finished with England yet. So in terms of the immediate captaincy, I would imagine that would stay with Harry Kane.
Henry, to again reflect on the Gareth Southgate legacy, we talk about not winning the trophy, but England was so close. I mean, particularly, of course, in 2021 at the delayed Euro 2020 tournament, it was a moment away from being so very different.
There are a lot of coulds and ifs and nearlies in there, and I respect that view, and I think what Southgate has done in terms of absolutely restoring the pride and putting England back in contention again. But with this collection of players, who many of them have won a fair bit at club level, who work for winners as managers, I'm sorry, it's about being brutal. It's about England getting over the line. So, all the will in the world, all the sort of smiles that have been brought back on the face of England football, it's still what you want to see gleaming is the shine on a trophy. And that hasn't appeared yet. Certainly on the men's side, the Lionesses are fantastic, but on the men's side, that hasn't been there for 58 years.
Well, I know, alas. But would you still frame Gareth Southgate as the best England men's team manager since Alf Ramsey?
Well, in terms of his record, yes. But, I mean, he's still got the same silverware return as Steve McLaren and Sam Allardyce. But no, that's been flippant. What he's done, the cultural reset, has been absolutely huge. He talks about finishers. He talks about starters as players, as finishers as players. He has started the process of England on the road towards a trophy, and now we need a finisher.
And in terms of just expand for us in the final 30 seconds, the way he's conducted himself as England manager.
Conducting himself with great dignity, under pressure. He's always come out, even with sort of critics like me and other people. He's always handled that well. He's always answered questions. He's an incredibly dignified individual in what could be a fairly undignified profession and situation at times. So absolutely, he goes out with his head held high.
Henry Winter, thanks so much for joining us there. On that breaking news that the England manager Gareth Southgate has announced he is stepping down and resigning following the Euro 2024 tournament, where England, of course, lost the final to Spain 2-1. We're out of time here on Sky News. We'll be right back with all of the day's news in just a couple of moments. This is Sky News Today. It's 12 o'clock. Good afternoon to you. Breaking news: England manager Gareth Southgate steps down after 8 years in charge. Thank you for creating a team that stands shoulder to shoulder with the world's finest. That's Prince William's tribute, as speculation, of course, now begins on who will succeed Southgate. The other breaking news this hour: the First Minister of Wales, Vaughan Gething, steps down after 4 of his cabinet ministers resign an hour earlier. A very good afternoon to you. We begin with the breaking news that Gareth Southgate has resigned as England manager after 102 games in charge of the Three Lions. It comes after England lost to Spain at the European Championship finals in Berlin on Sunday. In a statement, he said, "As a proud Englishman, it has been the honour of my life to play for England and to manage England. It has meant everything to me and I have given it my all. But it's time for change and for a new chapter. Sunday's final in Berlin against Spain was my final game as England manager. I joined the FA in 2011, determined to improve English football. In that time, including 8 years as England's men manager, I have been supported by some brilliant people who have my heartfelt thanks. I look forward to watching and celebrating as the players go on to create more special memories and to connect and inspire the nation as we know they can. Thank you, England, for everything." Well, Prince William, who is also, of course, the president of the Football Association, has led the tributes to Gareth Southgate. He wrote on Twitter, "Gareth, I want to thank you, not as the president of the FA, but as an England fan. Thank you for creating a team that stands shoulder to shoulder with the world's finest in 2024. Thank you for showing humility, compassion and true leadership under the most intense pressure and scrutiny. And thank you for being an all-round class act. You should be incredibly proud of what you've achieved." Well, our correspondent Daniel Henry is here with me on set. And Daniel, there was some speculation that he might make this decision on his own, or of course that the FA would look elsewhere themselves. But it's clear from all of this was a decision Southgate took on his own and announced fairly swiftly after the Euros final.
It was, and I think it's important. I think it was important for Gareth to be able to make that decision himself. There was a sense that he'd really earned the right to make that call. His contract was due to finish at the end of the year anyway, so there would have been a decision at some point. But the result following the defeat to Spain and not winning Euros 2024, I think brought that decision a little bit closer to home. And I think when we really look at Gareth Southgate, it really boils down to a few numbers: 8 years, 4 tournaments, 2 finals, but no trophies. And that's really what this is about. That's, this level of sport, elite level sport, is about winning. And he has made the team better. He's united the country, he's united the players with the way that he has conducted himself. But ultimately, he hasn't won a trophy. And that's what he set out to do. That's what the team set out to do. And unfortunately, they haven't been able to do it. So he has decided that now is the time to step aside.
Daniel, thank you. Stick around. We're going to bring in the former England player and football commentator. No, sorry, this is a statement from the former England player and commentator Gary Neville. He said, "Thank you, Gareth, you did a great job." Let's now bring in the FA's chief... Sorry. Let's bring in now Josh Walker, who is the former Middlesbrough player who played under Gareth Southgate at Middlesbrough. Josh Walker joins us. Josh, what was it like to play for Gareth Southgate, and how hard do you think it will have been for him to make this decision to step down?
I think it's a huge decision for him, and it's I think one that we kind of all expected would happen. But I think personally it will hit him hard. I mean, he's put so much time, effort. When he came into the job, the way the country was in terms of football, he's completely turned that around. I think when you ever to leave somewhere, if you can leave that job in a better position than what you started in, Gareth's certainly done that.
I mean, we talked about the statements that we had from Prince William, the president of the FA, and he talked about the way in which he handled himself in the job, talked about the words he used in terms of compassion, humility, leadership. Did you experience that when you worked with Southgate?
Yeah, I did. And I think a lot of times when I've spoke about Gareth, one thing about him as a person, he is a class act. He is a genuine, honest guy who gives it his all. Now, unfortunately, that hasn't been good enough. But in terms of the way he's handled everything, because let's be honest, being England manager, you're under so much scrutiny from every angle. But he's always batted that off really coolly, calmly, and he's handled it really well. So in terms of that, I think he's done better than any other England manager has in terms of handling that pressure, the longevity he's had in the job. I think he can go out with his head held high because he's knowing him from playing under him. He's given his all.
A lot of the coverage in recent weeks, but also days since the final result, is that the players loved playing for him and that the players wanted him to stay. Can you believe that? Or does there reach a point where they too, ultimately, they want to win a trophy, and 8 years is a long time, and you can't keep trying the same thing if it's not working?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, 8 years in a job is a long time. And I think, you know, the players will, like I'm saying here, have massive respect for him in terms of a person. I think now if we go on the profession side of it, there'll be a lot of players in that squad, even the ones who are playing, who must have been thinking, why are we setting up the way we are? You know, we've got so many fantastic attacking players, and it was every game we were scraping through and relying on substitutes and then hanging on. And even in the final, we bring on Cole Palmer, Watkins, we have a goal, we score a goal, and then we drop back off again. And the mentality of the lads, I think that the time has come, and I think it's come at the right time.
In terms of what's next, do you think the FA will or should stick with an English manager, or should they be looking at the likes of Jurgen Klopp and Mauricio Pochettino as well?
I think when it comes to club management, I think it should always be the best man for the job or best person for the job, whatever nationality you're from. I think when it's international football, I think it should be the country you're from. I think the only man I think who is right for this job, and I think would take this squad on massively and push us on to possibly winning something or performing better, I think would be Eddie Howe.
Daniel, in terms of how we got to this moment, just remind us of the legacy of Gareth Southgate. And he didn't win a trophy, but what did he achieve during his 8-year tenure?
Well, I think it's interesting to note that Gareth Southgate won more knockout games as England manager in the 8 years that he was in charge than any manager in the last 50 years. So his record is extraordinary. But the problem is that even though he won more of those knockout games than anybody else, there were 2 knockout games that he couldn't win, and they were the finals, Euro 2020 at Wembley and Euro 2024 just there in Berlin. And it's missing out on those 2 games where England had a chance to win a trophy and he didn't manage to guide the team to take it.
Also a critical missed penalty, of course, in the World Cup in 2022. So close yet so far, as is so often the case. But, Josh, much closer, to be clear, than England have got at any point since 1966. To reach 2 finals is such a huge achievement. To come to that phrase, so close yet so far, how much will it have hurt Southgate, who you know well, who you played under, that he did get so close but not quite win a trophy?
Well, yeah, I think overall, when you look at that, stats sometimes can be misleading. Do you know, when you look at that and you first think we've getting to another final this year, we've had, in my opinion, all the luck in the world to get there with the performances, the results, and then the side of the draw we got. I think had we been on the other side of the draw with the performances we had of this competition, we would have been nowhere near it. But I think in terms of, as Gareth, in terms of him as a person, this will affect him massively because he is a proud Englishman. He's a top guy. I can't stress that enough. He's someone that, even when you don't agree with what he's doing, he comes across honestly after games, and that's all you can ask for. You know, if someone's giving it their best, that's all you can do. And Gareth certainly has given his best. Now, unfortunately, it hasn't been good enough. But in terms of him as a person, it will affect him. But I'm sure he'll bounce back, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of clubs or possibly even other internationals where he could go in and give it another try. You know.
Josh, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Let's bring in now former England manager Sam Allardyce, Gareth Southgate's predecessor, no less. Sam, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. What in your mind is the legacy of Gareth Southgate as England manager?
Successful. I think there's no doubt about that. I think that where we were when he took over and to where he's finished, there's been nothing but success. And the success of Gareth, his backroom staff and the players has to be admired, really. I think that we all get criticised in the manager's position, and particularly in an international job. I think he's handled himself absolutely fantastically well. And I think 8 years is an awful long time to cope with the pressures that this job brings, you know. So I think that he's done all he needed to do. He's tried his very, very best, as has everybody else. And we've been very, very close to gaining the ultimate success, but not being quite good enough just to get it.
I mean, clearly, 2 finals does suggest that he was getting a lot right. It wasn't just a one-off. Is it a reminder of how much elite sport does also include a big slice of luck to get over the line?
Well, a big slice of luck in life can decide where you go, no matter how hard you work and what you do. I mean, the first thing is that, you know, you've got to be able to handle the position that you're in. And I think he's handled his position exceptionally well as a human being. We all know he's such a likeable lad. And he's managed through the ups and downs of England. And I don't consider there's been too many downs, by the way. Hardly any, of course. So, you know, he's decided that his time is up and everybody can look back on that with great success. And I think that, you know, what he needs to do now is pack his bags and have a really good long holiday with his family, because he deserves it.
He certainly does. And Sam, assess for us looking forward what the next manager of England has at their disposal. A lot of people talk about it being an extraordinary crop of talent available, particularly young talent that should only get better. Do you agree with that?
I think that there's some young talent that has come through even in this tournament. You know, I mean, there's quite a few changes from the last tournament in the Euros in England. I think that as time evolves, the next manager has to wait to see whether it can match or better this talent, and that is the difficulty of whoever is selected next time as the England manager. I think that probably on the front line, as Harry has struggled a little bit in this tournament, is how long will his international career last? And I think that is a big problem for England. Once Harry, I'm not saying he's going to retire now, but when the ultimate time for Harry retires for the next England manager, who is going to replace him? We need another goal scorer like we had with Wayne Rooney, like we've got with Harry, to replace him. And have we got that at the moment? We've got some good talent, but not the sort of talent that scores the goals that Harry Kane has scored in his career. So that will be one major problem the New England manager would have to face. The rest of the talent is exceptionally good. And that managing it is going to be a very difficult decision for the new manager that comes in. He's going to have a very difficult job emulating and bettering what Gareth's done.
In terms of the next manager, Sam, do you think, I mean, the first obvious question is whether or not the FA will stick with picking an English manager. Do you think they will?
Well, I said this yesterday. I said the fact of the matter is you know, English managers are a rare breed in the Premier League, and one would look to the Premier League to look where the English managers are, and there is very, very few, unfortunately. And this is obviously the downside of what is the biggest league in the world, and that's the Premier League. You know, so who do you look for in that category? That's the difficult thing. Preferably, for me, it always has been and should always be an English manager. So whether they decide to look to promote from within, whether they think that's the case, because Gareth was in the under 23 or under 21's position when he took over. So Whether they do that or not, or whether they look farther and wider out, but I wouldn't like to think that we pick a foreign manager because it's England. It deserves to be given to an Englishman.
I'm interested in your take on what the most significant job in football is. I mean, some have suggested if it was offered to Eddie Howe, for example, the Newcastle manager, that given, as you referenced there, the Premier League's the best league in the world now, would some managers prefer to lead one of the biggest Premier League clubs over the English national team, or do you not think that's the case?
It depends on what your ambitions are and what you feel at that particular time. I got interviewed in the height of my success at Bolton and lost out to Steve McLaren. I would have taken the job then, even though Bolton were riding high in the Premier League at that particular time and qualifying for Europe. I would have left the club I love the most to manage my country. But, you know, not everybody may consider that to be the case, you know. So one can only wait and see. And like I said, the pool is very, very small, and that is one of the problems the FA will face if they want to choose an Englishman.
Sam, to wrap things up, and it's really amazing to have you on talking about this at the moment, and you know better than most about the ups and downs of football, as you said, the luck and the bad luck that can come around. Do you have a closing message to Gareth? Do you feel for him at this moment?
I feel he's got nothing to feel sorry for other than he's done a fantastic job. I think that we've given our opinion as time has gone on. We've all looked at the Euros and sometimes we've been frustrated, which everybody gets. Whether you're a manager, in my experience, or whether you're an ordinary fan, you know, we all express our opinion because we're so intense on wanting England to do well. But you know, he can look back on his career and with great success, and he can move on with his life. And I'm sure that it won't be too long after he's had probably a good rest that we probably will see him in the Premier League somewhere. So, you know, get away, relax, and reflect on not anything other than how good he's been. I think that's probably what I would suggest. Certainly, if I was Gareth, you know. So, yeah, it's been a big decision he's made, and I don't think I'm surprised he's made that decision.
Sam, thanks so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
Sam Allardyce there, the former England manager, former Bolton manager, of course, before that. Further reflection has been coming through from Declan Rice, the Arsenal player, and, of course, the England central midfielder who played, I think, every minute of the recent European Championships. He says, "Thank you, Gaffer. It's been a privilege to play for England under your guidance. Memories that will stay with me forever. All the best in your next adventure." We've also had a tweet from the former England striker, the Match of the Day presenter, Gary Lineker. He's tweeted, "Wishing Gareth Southgate all the very best in the future. He brought pride, respect and togetherness to England that we hadn't seen for a long time. He was close, very close to footballing immortality, and he always did the job with humility, decency and dignity. Thank you, Gareth." Of course, that does come after Lineker did criticise Southgate in the way England were playing at times during the tournament. We're able to now bring in the former England defender, Steve Howie. Steve, we've been discussing this legacy of Gareth Southgate a lot in the last hour or so. Of course, he didn't win a trophy, but he did reach 2 finals. Is that success?
I think considering where we were and not really having any kind of success, I think probably the last time would have been Euro 96 with Terry Venables. And before, obviously, we've had, you know, very, very good players as well in between them times. And we haven't managed to get pretty much anywhere near. So I think when Gareth has come in, and for him to, I'm going to use the word achieved, but people are sort of saying, listen, we haven't won anything. But I think from where we were to being in the mix all the time for tournaments, I think he's done fantastic. I mean, I'm good at that he's left. I thought he might have just given one more go. But you can see the camaraderie, the togetherness, the group of players that he's getting together, young players that he's had when they were under 21s, now at the senior team. It seems a fantastic squad to be in. Obviously, there's been talk before about other squads in the past years that there's been little cliques here and there, but it doesn't seem like that with Gareth. As I said, it's disappointing Obviously, you know, managers are thick-skinned, but I think definitely it affected, well, not affected him, but I think he'd have been hurt and surprised at some of the reaction that he had got. I think the remit of when you're in the Euros or the World Cup is to get out of your group by any means. I mean, yes, we won fantastic football, but you know, we didn't play great football, but we did get out of the group. But I think that the you know, throwing stuff at him and the other stuff on social media and the other criticism, I think that was a hard one to take.
I wanted to touch on that camaraderie that you referenced that he managed to achieve amongst the England players. Maybe this was something that happened more in the decade or so between his time as manager and your time as an England player, or maybe you experienced it yourself. But how rare is it to have that sense of togetherness across all of the players, even though they've come from individual different club teams and are fierce rivals during most of the year? Was that quite an achievement on Southgate's part?
I think absolutely. I think you've just hit the nail on the head there. You know, normally throughout the season and in between tournaments, players that come into the mix for the England squad, the kind of arch enemies, if you want, you know, because obviously it's your team vying against their team to win the Premier League, to win cups. You come up against them every few weeks, or you'll come up against them every week, really, when it's the players scattered around the different teams in the Premier League. And when you come together, I think he worked very hard, and I think his staff's got to take a lot of credit for that as well. Worked very hard to make sure that that wasn't the case. And as I said, we've seen times when we've had the cameras go into the training facilities and how the boys are getting on, how they're interacting with each other. And I think that's been a major part. And when you get that at the hotel and the training ground, that comes onto the football pitch. And that's showed because, as I said, you know, we haven't been anywhere near. And now all of a sudden he comes in these 8 years, we have a quarter-final, semi-final and 2 finals, which is, you know, a fantastic achievement.
Should be the next manager.
I don't know. I mean, I know I've just listened to Sam there about it should be an Englishman. I kind of get his point in some respects, but you just want the best, don't you? You want the best for the country. I know Pochettino's been linked, and obviously Potter, Eddie Howe, one or two others. I think Klopp was mentioned, Pep Guardiola was mentioned. I think the FA need to sit down and try and find out the best man for the job. And on Lee Carsley, again, you've got that continuity, but, you know, people sort of say, well, is he ready? He hasn't really managed anybody. That's the difficult one. But you look at the Spain manager, he was the one that he's been sort of promoted up within. Nobody really heard of him. And sorry, not the Spain. Well, he's done that. You look at the Argentinian manager. Now he's got a World Cup and a Copa America under his belt. So it can work. But as I said, it's going to be probably a long task for the FA to get somebody in. To get somebody interim, who would that be? But I think a lot of managers, whilst it is a major honour to be a manager of your country, I think when you're manager of your country and things don't go well, if you get things wrong at club level, you've just got your fans that's giving you criticism. When you're manager of England, you've got the whole of the country. And I think Gareth sort of seen that, you know, firsthand, really, with this competition. So whilst it can be an amazing job, it has got that kind of poison chalice thing about it.
What a question for you as a former Newcastle great. I mean, Eddie Howe, how good is he?
He's a fantastic manager. Again, people sort of say, well, he hasn't won anything. You can only be one winner of competitions. I think the transformation that he'd done at Newcastle has been exceptional. But again, you know, would he want to do that? Because what he's built at Newcastle has been fantastic. Newcastle fans wouldn't want him to leave. But again, going back to my point, I think if you're asked to be manager of your country, I mean, that is a huge honour. That's what Gareth has just sort of said in his comments there. And it's a big thing to turn that down. So Newcastle fans won't be happy. But again, just going on what Sam said, you know, to be asked to represent your country as manager, it's a big thing, but not every manager wants to do that. Every manager wants to work with players day in, day out, rather than the big gaps that you do have.
Should England also have a new captain when the new manager comes in?
Well, I think Harry Kane, was he 30? Obviously, we haven't heard the full details, but he was clearly struggling with something, whether it was his back that he'd suffered at the back end for Bayern Munich, but ultimately he still scored 40-something goals. I think that'll have to be done by the new manager. I think they'll have to sit down and have a conversation, because we clearly didn't get the best out of Harry Kane. There's no mistaking he's a top player. But as I said, that will be a conversation for the new manager and Harry.
Well, Steve Howe, thanks so much for jumping in front of the camera for us and giving us your perspective on Gareth Southgate's news that he is stepping down as England manager. Steve Howe there, the former Newcastle and England player. It's not the only high-profile resignation taking place today. Let's turn to the other breaking news this lunchtime from Wales, where the First Minister, Vaughan Gething, has announced he will quit as the Welsh First Minister. It follows 4 of his cabinet members resigning all of a sudden from his government this morning, citing that they could no longer back Gething after a vote of confidence last month, which he lost in the Welsh Senedd. Vaughan Gething has been speaking in the last few minutes.
I have this morning taken the difficult decision to begin the process of stepping down as the leader of Welsh Labour and, as a result, the First Minister. Having been elected as the leader of my party in March this year, I had hoped that over the summer, a period of reflection, rebuilding and renewal could take place under my leadership. I recognise now that this is not possible. It has been an extraordinary honour to do this job for just a few short months. To see the dedication of the public service of our civil servants and the dedication to civility from the Welsh public. To see the election of a new Labour government in Westminster and the fresh hope that that brings for Wales. I have always pursued my political career to serve Wales, and being able to show underrepresented communities that there's a place for them, for us, is an honour and a privilege that will never diminish. It is what drew me into public service. Before becoming an MS, I was a trade union shop steward. I was an employment lawyer, representing people who had been mistreated at work. I wanted to give power to those without a voice, to help make our country a better place for all of us. That has always been my motivation. I campaigned to help create the Senedd, clocking up 30 years of work to support the devolution journey. This has been an incredibly difficult time for me and for my family. A growing assertion that some kind of wrongdoing has taken place has been pernicious, politically motivated, and patently untrue. In 11 years as a minister, I have never, ever made a decision for personal gain. I have never, ever misused or abused my ministerial responsibilities. My integrity matters. I have not compromised it. I regret that the burden of proof is no longer an important commodity in the language of our politics. I do hope that can change for all of us. I will now discuss with the Welsh Executive a timetable for the election of a new leader of Welsh Labour. Finally, I do want to say thank you to all those who have reached out to support me, my team, and my family in recent weeks. It really does mean a great deal. To those people in Wales who look like me, many of whom I know feel personally bruised and worried by this moment, I know that our country can be better. I know that cannot happen without us. There will and there must be in the future a government that looks like the country it serves. A government for all of us to make Wales a better place with and for all of us. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
Guys, Dan Whitehead, who's in Cardiff for reaction to this. Dan, there was a lot in that statement. Why don't we start by your reaction to how resolute he was that he ultimately feels he shouldn't have had to stand down?
Yeah, I mean, he's faced calls to stand down for over a month now, and he has resisted those calls. I think the fact that we had 4 members of his cabinet resign this morning, and then 2 hours later he resigned, it simply made his position completely untenable. Just to bring the viewers up to speed about how we've got to this point, there's really 2 big reasons. Firstly, over the last 6 months in the leadership campaign for Vaughan Gething to replace Mark Drakeford as the leader of Wales, he took a £200,000 donation from an environmental company, the director, the boss of who, had faced criminal convictions over environmental failures. That is why that caused a lot of controversy there. And secondly to that, Vaughan Gething sacked one of his own ministers once he did win as First Minister and he took charge of the government. He sacked Hannah Blythen, one of his ministers, because he accused her of leaking messages to do with COVID and throughout the COVID pandemic. She always denied that, and the publication in question said it wasn't her. And tomorrow in the Senedd here, the Welsh Parliament, there's meant to be a vote urging Vaughan Gething to release that evidence. Why did you sack her? The day before that vote, we've seen 4 of his cabinet ministers resign, and I think it has become simply too much on the pressure on Vaughan Gething, who, of course, lost a vote of confidence last month here in the Welsh Parliament. So he was leading a parliament which did not have confidence in him. He was facing another vote tomorrow. There was controversy surrounding this donation, controversy over how he sacked one of his ministers. He, as we heard there, has always denied any wrongdoing. It's going to be interesting because at 1:30 we've got First Minister's questions. So Vaughan Gething will be facing questions from all of those who have put pressure on him over the last few weeks and months. That's going to be one to watch. Let me just bring you a quick response from Andrew Davies, who is the Tory leader here in Wales. Vaughan Gething's resignation is long overdue, but there can be no doubt that his Labour colleagues, from those who resigned today all the way up to Keir Starmer, have stood by his side, and they're culpable for the breakdown of governance here in Wales. Wales will remember. This is going to be really interesting to see who the next, of course, Labour leader here is in Wales. Vaughan Gething says he will now work on a timetable for his replacement as Labour leader and, of course, in turn, First Minister here in Wales. Who will that be? How will they work with Keir Starmer, the Labour Prime Minister? Remember, this is the first time in 14 years we've had Labour in power in Wales and in Westminster, and this will be a test for Keir Starmer, who has backed Vaughan Gething throughout this controversy, and we will... We're seeing some movement there. We thought Mr. Gething might be coming out. It's not him. He's certainly inside, keeping inside the chamber of head of FMQs. This will be a real test for Keir Starmer. How is he going to respond to the news, and who, of course, will be the next leader here in Wales? That timetable, we'll try and get details on that this afternoon as to when we're expecting a new leader and a new First Minister to be put in place.
Dan Whitehead, thanks so much for that. Well, we're going to take a quick break here on Sky News, and when we return, we'll have all the very latest as Gareth Southgate announced he's standing down as England manager. Welcome back. A reminder of the breaking news this lunchtime. Gareth Southgate has resigned as England manager after 102 games in charge of the Three Lions. It comes after England lost to Spain at the European Championship final in Berlin on Sunday. Here is some of the highlights of Gareth Southgate's statement. He said, quote, "As a proud Englishman, it has been the honour of my life to play for England and to manage England. It has meant everything to me and I have given it my all. But it's time for change and for a new chapter. Sunday's final in Berlin against Spain was my final game as England manager. I joined the FA in 2011, determined to improve English football. In that time, including 8 years as England men's manager, I have been supported by some brilliant people who have my heartfelt thanks. I look forward to watching and celebrating as the players go on to create more special memories and to connect and inspire the nation as we know they can. Thank you, England, for everything." I'm now joined by our sports presenter, Jackie Beltrow. Jackie, great to have you join us on this. What is the headline for you in terms of Southgate's legacy as England manager?
Well, I think he's probably the best England manager we've ever had. I know people will say, what a ridiculous statement. Yeah, he did. But, you know, his overall record is not as consistent as Gareth Southgate's. He certainly is the best manager we've had in the modern era. I mean, no one else comes close to semi-final, final, quarter-final, final. I mean, you know, those are ridiculous stats. And when we were out there at the Euros, you know, all of the Germans that we spoke to, all the fans, they would have swapped places with us in that final in an instant. You know, to be the host nation in the final, that's what they wanted. They'd all bought the tickets to the final thinking they were making it. And actually, it wasn't them. It was England that got to the final and Spain. And they would have swapped places in an instant. He has done an extraordinary job with that team. He's united that team. He's brought all the players together when they previously were in little cliques of their separate clubs. He's managed to unite those players and make them want to play for the England national team. You rarely hear of players pulling out these days with a hamstring strain or this, that and the other, and then they turn up and play for their clubs, you know, a week later. You don't really see that anymore. It seems that people have got pride, the players have got pride in playing for the national side, so he's done that. He's united the fans as well. And the only sort of downside of his reign as far as the fans are concerned, he's really raised the bar and raised expectations so high that really only now winning it will do. Nothing else will do. Latter stages of tournaments is not good enough. I mean, you get to two finals and the fans were throwing beer cups at him. You know, it just wasn't good enough as far as fans were concerned. And I know there was criticisms of his tactics and being too conservative and not making substitutions quickly enough when the game wasn't going the way you wanted it to, all of those criticisms. But, you know, he did make some genius substitutions during those Euros, and I don't think you can level that at him this time because he did make changes. He made radical changes, and he made changes that no one expected. And, you know, look what Ollie Watkins did when he went on. Nobody expected that in that moment.
Jackie, you mentioned there the game, I think it was the second group game, maybe it was the third, where there were some boos towards Southgate and some cups of beer thrown towards him. But that doesn't represent really what the fans think of Southgate. Perhaps doesn't even represent what those individual fans think of Southgate.
No, perhaps not. It was just in the moment, frustration, you know, why is it going our way? You know, and I think frustration at the way that England were playing overall at the Euros. It wasn't great. It wasn't great the way they played, given the quality of players that England have at their disposal, that were on the pitch, you know, the way the players play for their clubs, and then it wasn't really translating in those moments at the Euros, and it wasn't gelling. They just didn't really click for a long time. It got better towards the end of those group matches, and it was better for sort of moments during the Euros. But I think if you look at the tournament overall, nothing really clicked for any long periods of time, and players looked tired. You know, Jude Bellingham looked out on his feet, particularly in that final. And I know they were going to make a substitution and take him off towards the end, but then it's Jude Bellingham, so you know you always run the risk that he might do something magical when you least expect it. So yeah, I think it was just frustration at the way things were going and the way England were playing. It was just sort of too staged, too slow, too conservative. And I'm sure that is not the way Gareth Southgate set out for things to be. It's just the way things turned out on those nights in those matches. But it'll be interesting to see who they replace him with. I mean, you know, such a short list. I mean, who's available, who's around? Graham Potter's perhaps the only one that's available. You know, Eddie Howe would perhaps be most people's choice, but he's not available. I mean, there's not a load of people that you can go to, and I would say, you know, be careful what you wish for next.
Well, on that note, I mean, as you said, we don't know who will be the choice and whether they'll take it or not. But is this something that the FA will have been preparing for? It's not completely out of the blue that Southgate's decided to step down, or will this take them quite a few weeks and months to come up with their decision?
Well, I think timing in football is everything, isn't it? It's just, you know, who is around, who would want it. And I think, you know, if Southgate had won, would he have still walked away? Probably. You know, an 8-year cycle is probably as much as he could take. It's an exhausting job. I'm sure the FA have got, they have said that they've got interim plans in place, but they are interim plans. But then let's not forget that Gareth Southgate was an interim plan that turned into a permanent plan that turned out to be so very successful. So you just never know. I mean, look at Spain. They've got Luis de la Fuente, and when he was appointed, everyone thought, well, why? You know, is that the best we've got? And then he goes around and wins the Euros. So you just never know how these things can turn out. But I think, you know, in the same way that they know they're not going to have Serena Wiegmann forever, they will have a plan in place of the sort of person they would like to take charge of the team next. Maybe they've made approaches to people already. I don't know. But you'd like to think that this hasn't come completely out of the blue, because no one stays in a managerial job forever, and no one stays in the England managerial job forever. That's for sure. But I think, you know, maybe Gareth Southgate might have dropped hints that he was tired and he'd had enough. Maybe before this tournament ended, I don't know. But I know that certainly a lot of people who work with him closely think that he was very weary by the end of it, and all the personal criticism takes its toll. There was so much of that, and I think there's only so much of that someone can take as a human being. You know, he is a human being. He's a very nice man. He's a sensitive man, and he's done a wonderful job for England. Those traits in his character have really helped England, because he's put an arm around players, the younger players, when they've been suffering, you know, racial abuse, things like that after the Euros 3 years ago. You know, he was the right man in the job to put an arm around those players and move them on and comfort them. So when you're appointing the England manager, I think there's a lot of things that now that he has set the bar very high. You have to take into consideration what sort of man are we appointing for this job that's got to unite all these players from all these different clubs. I mean, what you don't want is to go down a Fabio Capello route again. I mean, that could not have been fun, playing in that era when, you know, your manager comes in and bans ketchup. You don't want a figure like that taking over the England team. So I think there's lots of considerations that will come into play. But obviously, winning something is what they want. So it's going to have to be a manager who's, I would imagine, tried and tested.
Jackie, as always, thanks so much. Jackie Baltray, though, joining us with her reaction to the news that Gareth Southgate has stepped down as England manager. Let's now get reaction from the former England midfielder, Trevor Steven. Trevor, great to have you with us. I mean, again, we've been asking this of a lot of people today in terms of what is the legacy of Gareth Southgate. Is reaching 2 finals the legacy, or is not winning a trophy the legacy?
I would err on the positive. First and foremost, before we get to the semi-finals and the finals that he's got us into, I think he has been very much responsible for building a new culture and environment for the England team to develop under, which is a core ingredient. If you've not got togetherness and fighting for a common goal within your squad, then you're never going to get far at all. So one thing that he was able to achieve was making the players want to play for England and enjoying it. And over the period, we've seen some fantastic England performances, but we've also seen performances that were lacking when we've been getting to the latter stages of competitions. Under Gareth, we have qualified for every tournament easily, and that tells you something first and foremost. But when it got to the absolute pinch of a tournament, we were lacking. And I think it's been highlighted in this particular tournament where we never showed form. There were glimpses, but we never really showed form and dominated one game. And that is really what has been his undoing. So whether he has decided on a tactic and tried to force those players into it, or whether he wasn't quite sure what he was going to play because we've got such an array of good players, seems to me that he's caught between pillar and post. And that is the sad ending, but also a fantastic ending as well, because we rode the ride through the tournament. We got to we knew we were lucky at times. We knew that the draw was lucky for us as well, but we did get there. But it is time for change. Overall, his legacy is he's changed the environment that the English players will now play their international football under, wearing the 3 lions.
The extent to which he's changed that and the quality that exists with that kind of platform that Southgate has built for whoever comes in. Should England win the next World Cup?
Should they be winning? I mean, you can't. The thing, this is our attitude, isn't it? That we've got a right to expect getting to these stages of the tournament. We did great to get there again in this tournament, but we knew we hadn't done well. And what's frustrating to the England fans is, well, why is Phil Foden not playing anything like he plays for City? Why is Declan Rice not influential in these games? We could go right through the team, literally. Why is Harry Kane so non-effective in this particular setup? Bellingham is so not comfortable with where he was playing, he's run himself into the ground. So all of these things make it really shine out for me that we need a new manager with a new idea as to what it takes to win in international tournament football. And that's the person that we need to look out for. That's the person we need to find. And I understand that the FA are going to be looking at an interim manager because football goes thick and fast, and it won't be that long before England have to play again. So that may be the solution. As Gareth, Gareth started out as interim and ended up having 8 years in the job.
I'm interested on your take as to who would say yes, because some of the guests we've had have suggested, oh, well, Klopp's not actually available. He's taking a break. I mean, why not go for Klopp? Why not go for Pep? Isn't this a job that people would kill for?
I know. I would pretty well guarantee you that Pep will be at Manchester City. He is prepping his team already for the start of the new campaign, and that is what he'll be concerning himself with. I do think it could be a possibility in 12 months' time, because he will be ready for change then, I think, and will probably leave Manchester City. But does he want to take a year off and then, the England job will resurface again in due course, won't it, even beyond the next appointment? So somewhere down the line, maybe. But my personal thought is an English manager, if at all possible. But do we have one that's capable at this moment in time? Graham Potter seems to be the one that's floating to the surface, because the style of football he played at Brighton didn't go well at Chelsea, but wasn't there for very long. And he's been available, and he will have been developing a lot of coaching ideas as well since he's been out of the game. And you could almost say, albeit he wouldn't be appointed as an interim, he could come in, I think, and pick up the reins pretty quickly and understand what needs to be done in the short term. And if he does well, he keeps the job. If he doesn't, potentially a Pep Guardiola could step in 12 months' time.
Trevor, Stephen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You're watching Sky News Today. We're going to take a quick break. After we come back, we'll have a look at who might replace Gareth Southgate in more detail.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it. Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone, I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public.
My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Emirates Premium Economy. Maybe one day all airlines will have seats like this. Fly Emirates, fly better. Thank you.
Welcome back. A reminder of the breaking news this lunchtime. Gareth Southgate has resigned as England manager after 102 games in charge of the Three Lions. Let's have a look at the odds from various betting companies in terms of who might replace Gareth Southgate. According to Sky Bet, the former Brighton and Chelsea manager Graham Potter is the front-runner, 6-4. Lee Carsley, the England under-21s manager, comes in at 5-2, as does Eddie Howe. Other names that are being mentioned include the former Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp and the former Everton manager Frank Lampard. I don't know if we've got the odds for them coming. Our correspondent Daniel Henry is here. Daniel, interesting to see some of those odds floated, and I guess the favourites there, three Englishmen, based on what we were looking at just there. Talk us through what's expected, because there's also talk of an interim appointment.
There is, and, you know, I think for the FA, when you consider how Gareth Southgate came into the picture in the first place, he was an interim appointment himself. So they would have then been looking ahead to think, well, when Gareth Southgate moves on, we've got to have a plan in place. And I think you're getting the hints of that from the statement that we've got from the chief executive of the FA, Mark Bullingham. He said, on behalf of English football, I'd like to pay tribute to Gareth Southgate and to Steve Holland for everything they have achieved. Over the last 8 years, they have transformed the England men's team, delivering unforgettable memories for everyone who loves the Three Lions. But this is probably the bit that's important. They look back on Gareth's tenure with huge pride. His contributions to the English game, including a significant role in player development, culture transformation, has been unique. However, his record of winning tournament games is most extraordinary. Gareth has made the impossible job possible and laid strong foundations for future success. He is held in the highest regard by the players, the backroom staff, and everybody at the FA across the world of football. That statement actually extends to point out that they already have an interim person in mind. They would have been aware that Gareth Southgate's this would have been Gareth Southgate's fourth tournament. The possibility whether he'd won the Euro 2024 tournament or not, that they would have had to have had something up their sleeve. So we saw some of the names in the frame, but no one's confirmed yet. And I think when you really look at the scale of what this job is, it's not just about being the manager of the England football team representing England. You're representing the country on the world stage. 8 years, that's effectively like 2 presidential terms, you know. So, you know, it can be a very gruelling, long, difficult job, but Gareth Southgate is given a picture of how you can do it with class and humility, and they'll be looking for somebody who can follow in those kinds of footsteps.
Daniel, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Daniel Henry here from Sky, covering that news, and there'll be much more coverage of it at the top of the hour with Jane Secker. Gareth Southgate standing down as England manager. Jane will have all of the latest reaction to that resignation and, of course, that of the Welsh First Minister, who also stood down earlier today.
Hello, you're watching Sky News Today. It's 1 o'clock. These are the headlines. England manager Gareth Southgate steps down after 8 years in charge, saying he's given it his all. Thank you for creating a team that stands shoulder to shoulder with the world's finest. Prince William leads the tributes to Southgate as speculation begins on who will succeed him. Also this hour, the First Minister of Wales, Vaughan Gething, steps down after 4 of his cabinet ministers resign. Hello, good afternoon. We begin with the breaking news that Gareth Southgate has resigned as England's manager after 102 games in charge of the Three Lions. It comes after England lost to Spain at the European Championships final in Berlin on Sunday. In a statement, Gareth Southgate said, "As a proud Englishman, it has been the honour of my life to play for England and to manage England. It has meant everything to me, and I have given it my all. But it's time for change and for a new chapter." Sunday's final in Berlin against Spain was my final game as England manager. I joined the FA in 2011, determined to improve English football. In that time, including 8 years as England's men's manager, I've been supported by some brilliant people who have my heartfelt thanks. I look forward to watching and celebrating as the players go on to create more special memories and to connect and inspire the nation, as we know they can. Thank you, England, for everything. Well, in response, Prince William, the president of the Football Association, led the tributes to Gareth Southgate. Gareth, I want to thank you, not as the president of the FA, but as an England fan. Thank you for creating a team that stands shoulder to shoulder with the world's finest in 2024. Thank you for showing humility, compassion and true leadership under the most intense pressure and scrutiny. And thank you for being an all-round class act. You should be incredibly proud of what you've achieved. Well, our correspondent Daniel Henry is here in the studio. Daniel, the writing, it felt, was on the wall after what happened in Berlin. Was this the right time to go?
I'm sure that he didn't really want to go. He would have wanted to have gone out on a high with the trophy aloft and the ticker tape falling, but that's not how it goes sometimes in elite sport. And Gareth Southgate's been around long enough to know that. This would have been his decision. His contract was due at the end of the year. This was not a call from the FA, this came from him. And I think it's fair to say that he has earned the right to make that decision, having led England over 4 tournaments now over the 8 years. 4 tournaments, 2 finals, but no trophies. And that really is the defining epitaph, I think, on his watch as England manager. But you can also see from the statements that have come in, you just read from Prince William there, so many others, the players, Gary Lineker, and then I'm sure they'll just keep coming in through the day. You can see how how he was loved, the affection in which he was held, despite not being able to kind of quite get over the line. We've got a statement also from the chief executive of the FA, Mark Bullingham, here, talking about how he had transformed the England's men's team and that he can look back on his time with immense pride, talking about his extraordinary record of winning tournament knockouts. He said, on behalf of English football, that he'd like to pay tribute to Gareth Southgate and to Steve Holland for everything they have achieved. Over the last 8 years, they have transformed the England's men's team, delivering unforgettable memories for everyone who loves the 3 Lions. We look back on Gareth's tenure with huge pride. His contribution to the English game, including a significant role in player development and in culture transformation, has been unique. However, it's his record of winning tournament games which is most extraordinary. Gareth has made the impossible job possible and has laid strong foundations for future success. He is held in the highest regard by the players, the backroom staff and everyone at the FA and across the world of football. And I think those sentiments will be echoed up and down stadiums around the country.
And we've also had a statement in the last few moments from the broadcaster and former England striker Gary Lineker. He says, wishing Gareth Southgate all the very best in the future. He brought pride, respect and a togetherness to England that we hadn't seen for a long time. He was close, very close to footballing immortality, and he always did the job with humility, decency and dignity. Thank you, Gareth. Of course, Gary Lineker wasn't always entirely effusive about England's performance in the Euros. No,
and many people weren't. You'd look at some of the individuals on that team and know how they would play for their clubs, the likes of Phil Foden, Jude Bellingham, and the like, and then see them in an England shirt and say, well, they're not quite functioning exactly the same way. Why are we not seeing that? And some of that has to be laid at Gareth Southgate's door, but he managed to give the team a togetherness. He managed to make them a cohesive unit. It's very, very easy to forget where he inherited the team from. When he took over in 2016, England had just been beaten by Iceland. They didn't qualify for the Euro 2016 tournament. Sam Allardyce was the manager prior to that. He had to leave in some very questionable circumstances. And Gareth Southgate ended up taking over, initially as an interim, and then going on to be the permanent coach. So he has redefined what we thought was possible for an England team. There was always hopes that England would do well. There was always hopes that England might go on to win something. And he raised those hopes with the way that he guided the team. But unfortunately, he wasn't quite able to get it done. And that is why he is leaving today.
OK, Daniel, thanks very much. Well, those are Daniel's thoughts. Let's talk to sports journalist Paddy Barclay now. And Paddy, you know, it seems there are no prizes for taking England as far as they've gone in 60 years.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the first thing to say, that he leaves a huge success, as a huge success, and should be recognised as such. I mean, Bobby Robson is recognised as a national, the late Sir Bobby Robson, recognised as a national treasure. Gareth Southgate deserves the same, you know, for being an even more successful England manager than Bobby Robson, and indeed anyone since Alf Ramsey. So I think I'm very, very glad that he's stepped down. I think he's taken enough daft criticism, and I think the criticism towards the end, and particularly during this tournament, was turning really stupid, you know, was turning silly and excessive. And I don't mean just from pundits, you know, you've mentioned, you know, Gary Lineker and so on, but from the public. I mean, you walk through the streets and you hear all this tripe about handbrakes and so on. Well, we saw in the final what happened when Gareth allowed England to play without a handbrake. They were giving away a chance every 5 minutes. So I think he was a tremendous England manager. And even more than that, a great man, the way he's transformed England, not only in the terms of the football culture. I mean, at long last, England aren't frightened of possession. They don't get a nosebleed after 4 passes. I mean, not just that, but the way, I mean, I think Daniel and others have talked about the togetherness and so on. And he's, above all, he's brought a togetherness between the team and the people. And I think he's been wonderful for English football, and I really think there's a lot more to come from him because of his personal qualities are exceptional.
Well, you know, you talk about his personal qualities, and so did Prince William. He talked about his humility and his compassion. But is that what you need? You know, can you have humility and compassion and also have a killer edge?
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. I don't personally think there's anything in that at all. I mean, among the people being suggested as his successor are some very nice gentlemen. So I really don't. I do think you need you do need to be able to take tough decisions to be a top football manager. But you ask Jack Grealish, you ask, you know, all the players who were left out of the Euro squad. I mean, he's capable of making tough decisions, or was capable of making tough decisions. But it is a fair point. He is one of the nicest people in management.
So who should succeed him?
Immediately, I think it should be an easy one for the FA. Do what, you know, they did 8 years ago, and promote the under-21 manager. I mean, Lee Carsley has done very well. He's just won, I think he won the most recent under-21 championship. You hear, not on the grapevine, you hear nothing but good stuff about Lee Carsley. So I would have thought, put his feet under the table and see what happens. I think talk of, you know, this beauty contest of Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola. I mean, dear me. Pochettino now. I mean, good, very, very good managers. But if you look across the world, well, look at Spain. They didn't appoint some, you know, sexy big name manager. De La Fuente came up through the ranks and has just won the World Cup. I mean, that's how you do it. But of course, there's always this English tendency to, certainly among the media, not so much among the FA, thank goodness these days, but you remember Fabio Capello, Sven-Göran Eriksson, you know, plucking the manager of the time from abroad. I hope that that's over, and I hope that England will do it the right way. And certainly Carsley would be ideal. Eddie Howe's another one. He's a nice chap as well, though. You might want somebody more nasty. I don't know. No, to be serious, I just think I hope it'll be an Englishman. That's the main thing.
Paddy, we're going to leave it there. Paddy Barclay, sports writer, good to talk to you. Thanks very much. Just stepping away from this breaking news story to bring you another story that we were talking about extensively yesterday, the search for Jay Slater. The autopsy has been carried out by the Spanish forensic team, and the autopsy fingerprinting does confirm that the body found in Tenerife does belong to the missing Briton Jay Slater. This has come from a court spokesman, and they've also said that the injuries to Jay Slater's body were compatible with a fall from a cliff. So this is just coming to us now from sources in Spain that it is confirmed to be Jay Slater's body that was found yesterday, very close to the place where he was last seen missing. His belongings were next to the body that they found. His phone was next to the body that was found. They have now confirmed that the fingerprints show that the body does belong to Jay Slater, and also that the injuries on that body are compatible with a fall from a cliff. Now, this was what the police did say yesterday. They said that the body initially showed injuries that were consistent with having a fall or an injury. He was discovered by members of a mountain rescue team from the Spanish Civil Guard, just discovered yesterday morning near the village of Masca. The charity LBT Global yesterday, representing the family, said that they were devastated to receive this news, didn't want to talk to the media. We also had a comment just a little bit earlier today from a friend of the missing teenager, Jay Slater. This was his friend Lucy Law, who was the last known person that spoke to him during a phone call on June the 17th. On her Instagram page, she said, "Honestly lost for words, always the happiest and most smiley person in the room. You was one of a kind, Jay, and you'll be missed more than you know. I'm sure you'll have your dancing shoes polished and ready, waiting for us all. We all love you, buddy." So that was a comment a little earlier today from the friend of Jay Slater. That was Lucy Law. As we bring you the news that the Spanish authorities have confirmed that the body that they found yesterday near the village of Masca by a mountain rescue team is that of Jay Slater. They have confirmed that by fingerprinting, but they also say that, as the police did say yesterday, the coroner has confirmed that the injuries that he suffered from are consistent with a fall from a cliff. We're going to talk to our correspondent, Tom Parmenter, who's out in Tenerife in a short while. Meanwhile, let's return to Gareth Southgate. Leaving England, well, the former England footballer Dean Ashton is at the Walking's brilliant annual golf event, raising money for local mental health charities organised by ex-footballers. He told Sky Sports News that ultimately the team is ready for a new manager.
I think it's the right call. I think Gareth's intelligent enough to probably have sensed a change in mood around probably England fans and the media towards him as manager, and maybe the style. I think he said as much almost when he was out there, wasn't he, in terms of the atmosphere and topping the group and still being criticised the way they were. And I think he's made the right decision. He's done an incredible job in the way he's turned around the mindset of England players and turning up to squads and tournament attitudes and the penalty situation and how he's managed that. There's so many fantastic things I think he's done with the England side, but I think this tournament has shown that maybe he's reached those limits with this squad.
Yeah, every manager, I guess, has a shelf life, but as you say, do you feel his legacy is something that can be really built on going forward now?
I think the longer it goes on and the more we reflect, I think we will look at the achievements that he's made. Certainly in my lifetime, all I ever remembered was misery, pretty much. And he's given us some incredible moments, and he has in this tournament. I know that maybe the style and the football's been extremely difficult to watch at times, but we've had some seriously incredible moments leading to the final, ultimately ending in disappointment. But I think we'll look back in years to come at what he's been able to develop and a change in mindset with the squad and the players.
You've touched on it there in a way. Do you feel there'll always be two schools of thought, though, that perhaps this team could have achieved more?
Yes, definitely, and I remember back when he was sat as an under-21s coach and Dan Ashworth, and they talked about what they wanted from the England team going forward and the players that they wanted to develop, about being dominant in possession, being intelligent and aggressive out of possession, and I didn't feel like we saw that with this team in this tournament. I think that's a big issue in terms of we're developing some incredibly talented players, and he's done incredibly well to learn how to manage tournaments and how to get through tournaments and what's best in that sense. But ultimately, I think this team and this squad is ready for another step on from this.
He took over in an incredibly difficult situation after a pretty terrible tournament at Euro 2016. The new manager has got a much better building block to start with, hasn't he?
Very much so, yeah. I think he's handled the whole situation impeccably. He's had so much to deal with. The way he's conducted himself, I think that's where we should be proud of him as an England manager, in the way that he's conducted himself and the way that he made us fall back in love with the national team. There was a certain period, maybe not this tournament, but where he'd drawn us all back in, and there'd been a real connection between the players, the supporters, the media, and that was down to him and his coaching staff, and they should take a huge amount of credit for that. But ultimately, we're greedy and we want success, and that's how it felt. It just felt like such a disappointment to get to another final and not prevail, that it maybe feels like it needs another fresh approach to add on top of what he's already built.
Where do you feel this fresh approach is going to come from then? Who do you think the FA will be looking at?
I think it's a really difficult decision. In the past, maybe we've gone for managers that we think, well, it has to be instant success, which it obviously feels that way with the players that we've developed. But also they've looked at how they developed Gareth through the 21s and into the national team. You look at De La Fuentes as well, has done the same for Spain. So probably really conflicting as to who's available, whether it's English or a foreign manager. But it feels like a really, really big decision because of what's been left and the talent that we've got.
Well, Sky Sports News have been talking to some of Gareth Southgate's former teammates at that same event.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised. I'm very surprised. I got asked that question this morning. I would have thought he would have stayed on for the World Cup. You know, having not won anything with England, and Gareth's a proud man. You know, he was a gentleman when I played with him, and he's conducted himself fantastically well in the England setup over the years. Unfortunately, not won anything, but he's decided. Obviously, it must be for his own personal and family reasons. You know, I know that he'll become a very good manager, probably a Premier League manager, whoever it will be. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of people asking him to manage his football club.
Yeah, do you feel he leaves a great legacy behind at England, and that the national team is in good hands now?
Yeah, I think, listen, the togetherness that he's brought between the group, I think over the years in the England squads there's always been like little mix and matches, isn't there? You know? But he's brought them all together. They all got on famously well. You know, they've got a great young squad. You know, obviously, unfortunately, we never beat Spain, but you know the togetherness that he's brought together is unbelievable, and you know good luck to his future now and see wherever it takes him.
I think it was inevitable. I think it was going to happen, but I know Gareth pretty well from time at Middlesbrough with him. I just hope that he's kept on board in some capacity. I think that would be a really good thing, because I know how passionate he is, but you know, maybe club management's around the corner, you don't know. But I think he's done a fantastic job. I don't think anybody can deny that, and I think he's handled himself absolutely fantastically.
Yeah, it's been brilliant to see the way he has conducted himself, because there has been criticism at times as well. And when you look at the record of the England team in major tournaments, does that surprise you?
I think he's done pretty well, yeah. But I think I'm of the opinion of everybody else. The Euros, I think it could have been better, a bit more exciting. We wanted a little bit more exciting. It didn't happen. And against Holland, I thought the first half, I thought that was the making of going to make a great final. But I think the best team won it in the end anyway.
And what do you feel now then? Do you feel going forward, where do you think England should be looking?
Hopefully another English coach. Yeah. You know, so but I don't know. There'll be a lot of talk, I presume, about Eddie Howe up at Newcastle, who I think will probably be one of the favourites, I would imagine. But there's a few big ones out of work as well. And Mr. Klopp's out of work, isn't he? So you just never know with this game, do you? You just never know.
Let's just remind you of the other bit of breaking news developing this afternoon, and that is the word from Spain that they have shown that an autopsy has confirmed that the body that they found yesterday on the island of Tenerife does belong to Jay Slater. Fingerprinting has confirmed that. They've also confirmed that the injuries that he suffered are compatible with a fall from a cliff. Tom Parmenter is in Tenerife for us. And Tom, this is desperately sad news, isn't it? Found very, very close to where his last mobile signal was, clearly injured, it seems, falling into the undergrowth there. And just a tragedy that he wasn't found earlier.
Yes, of course, his family have held on to the hope that there may have been another explanation throughout the 29 days of searching that took place on this island. We're just outside the village of Masca, and this is the valley where that discovery was made yesterday by the mountain rescue search teams. It goes right the way down from here through the ravine down towards the sea, and it is very difficult terrain, and there are many obstacles. There are many places that are difficult to get through on foot, and you would actually have to climb down rock faces to make it all the way through this valley. And the confirmation from one of the courts in the Canary Islands in the last few minutes confirmed to Sky News is that the results from that autopsy that had been carried out show that via fingerprinting it was indeed Jay Slater, which of course was what they strongly suspected yesterday when they announced that those remains had been found, because they had also found his clothes and some of his possessions. So desperately sad news for his family. They are still on the island, as we understand it, and we also have seen this morning in this valley a search team continuing that work to try and see if there are any further clues out there or any other bits of evidence that may have been missed. But this is such difficult terrain to scour because the undergrowth is so thick. You have to hack your way through it to get through in certain sections. And the conclusion from the court in the Canary Islands is that the most likely thing that happened to Jay Slater was that he fell possibly down a cliff face or some other steep bank that led to an injury that led sadly to his death. So the confirmation really of what the family and all those involved in the search pretty much knew was coming, but the court's now confirming that here in the Canary Islands. As I say, the search does go on in the valley below for any other evidence that might be down there.
And as you've been talking to us, Tom, we've got a little bit more information from the Spanish authorities. They are saying, as we've said, that fingerprinting confirms it belongs to Jay Slater. The death due to multiple traumas compatible with a fall in the mountainous area, they are saying. What will his family do now? Presumably they will want to bring Jay's body back to the UK as soon as possible.
Yes, I'm sure the preparations and the arrangements are being made at what is an incredibly difficult time for them, and a time in which they have also criticised the whole online furore that has been around this case, with conspiracy theorists or people spreading incorrect rumours about the case. The family have called that out in the last few days and said that it has made a very, very difficult situation far worse to try and deal with, and that is something that is a hallmark of this case, a troubling hallmark, really, that we've seen in other high-profile missing persons cases. And there will no doubt be further questions as to exactly how that can be remedied to protect and support families who find themselves in these kind of very difficult situations. We know that also there will be kind of guidance and lessons to be learned, but there are also things such as the questions that still remain unanswered about Jay Slater's disappearance. Why did he set off on what seems like an almost impossible walk, an 11-hour walk from this point in the mountains back down to the south of the island after he'd been out partying? There are many things perhaps that we will never know about this disappearance, questions that may remain unanswered, but those confirmations, or the confirmation from the courts, at least do give the family a definitive answer as to what happened, if not entirely, why Jay Slater was in this valley and why precisely he fell.
Tom, thanks very much. Thanks for bringing us the latest there. Here, the Defence Secretary says a review of the UK's defence will balance the requirements for national security with sound public finances. John Healey's to oversee the review of the armed forces, which will consider the capabilities needed to address threats to the UK. Speaking during a visit to the headquarters of the Joint Forces Command in northwest London, Mr Healey told how the review comes amid a fast-changing world.
A new government needs to take account of the new era that we're in for defence of this country. We've seen conflict in the Middle East and the threat of wider regional tensions, a continuing war in Ukraine, increasing instability and uncertainty right round the world. The world is changing fast. The threats are growing. In those circumstances, it's right we take a look at the threats, the capabilities we need, the state of our armed forces, as well as the money that's available to fund those. And that's the way that we balance, if you like, the requirements for stronger national security with the responsibilities for sound public finances.
Well, our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes joins us now. And Deborah, they're going to be reviewing the threats that the UK faces, but of course, at the same time, there are also changes amongst the UK's allies, which could change things enormously.
Yes, and of course all eyes on the United States, especially given the news overnight about who Donald Trump's running mate is going to be in this year's presidential election, a senator called J.D. Vance, who echoes his boss's views when it comes to foreign policy, which of course is all about America first. And that really raises questions about key fundamental presumptions of the US always being a reliant member of the NATO alliance, a key, crucial, powerful member of the NATO alliance, and also a core ally alongside the UK and others in the support of Ukraine combating Russia's invasion. So all of these potential changes to the US alliance are going to be taking place while here in the UK you have this new defence review being launched, and people listening might wonder why we're having another defence review. We've literally had 2 already in the last 4 years, and yet defence is still in a mess. There still is a massive black hole when it comes to the actual budget. There are still huge questions about how badly the UK actually spends what is a significantly large defence budget itself. And you have now John Healey coming in saying that he's going to have a new era for defence, a new touch review with 3 experts being brought in. They're outsiders, although actually they are really insiders, including Lord Robertson, who was Labour's Defence Secretary when Labour last conducted a defence review more than a quarter of a century ago. So not really fresh eyes, but definitely wise eyes. You've also got Fiona Hill, interestingly,